R- RP, RPE 10 all the time is in full effect right now. If you're watching this on video, I don't know if it does it justice, but I got like a little, I come home from jiu-jitsu one day and I get a bruise underneath my eye. I come in the next day and I have the other eye. I come home yesterday and I can't extend out my finger. And Ashley just looks at me. She's like, what the hell? Like, why do you even do that? And anyways, it's just for the love of jiu-jitsu, I guess. The other day I had some massive, you know who NCMA is, Gabe? You know who NCMA is, right? From the Mark Bell podcast. He came and we did 2-minute rounds. And so I think that's what kind of led to my my beat upness this week. But I was in the cold plunge this morning. I have my coffee. I am feeling ready to rock and roll. Talk about whatever you'd like to talk about.
Man, where do you want to start? No, I think that I know that this is going to come out after the podcast we recorded with Chris Cooper from Two Brains. So if you guys haven't checked out that episode, definitely check it out, especially if you're a gym owner interested in, we dove a little bit more into the business side of things, the CrossFit space, the gym owning space. And I thought there was some really good stuff there. But one thing that really, it was just an idea. Sure. Just an idea that came to me like while we were recording. Honestly, I hadn't thought of it before. And it's not like this like super innovative idea. It really isn't. But I think it hasn't been talked about in like the context of our space. And I wrote about it on the B2B newsletter that went out this week. So 2 weeks ago, for when this comes out. Yeah. And I just think it's an interesting like concept that I think we can dive into a little bit further. And also just like the whole idea of like alternate routes for education. So, if you haven't checked out the newsletter or if you haven't listened to the Chris Cooper episode, essentially the idea is, one problem that we always hear gym owners talk about is getting staff, right? Like hiring coaches is really tough. Yep. And I think a part of the problem is that like we haven't figured out yet. And I think that there are some people that are doing a good job trying to figure this out, but we haven't figured out yet like a clear path and trajectory for like coaches to make fitness their career, right? To like actually like, this is what I'm going to do. And I'm going to make enough to like live comfortably, retire, so on and so forth. Like, it's just no matter how passionate you are about it, unless you find yourself in like a, sales marketing role or like growing with the business, and first of all, you have to be working for a gym that's also like growing to the point where you can fit under that and make a living, which is, tough altogether. Right. Given the fact that, the average gym owner is bringing in, what is it, 30K a year, in profits. So that's one obstacle, right? Is like, how do coaches build a career out of coaching? And then the other obstacle is like, it's really hard to get people to hire people in the first place. And that's why so many gyms end up getting, like a ragtag team of like part-time staff. That's like, people that have real, other 9-to-5 jobs. And then, they'll coach at 5 a.m. and 6 a.m. They'll coach the weekends here and there. And, one thing we always hear about, and it's a real tough situation, is how do you get the same buy-in and pride to like be exceptional coaches from someone that's, really, to like call a spade, trying to like offset their gym membership by like coming in and coaching the 5 a.m. a couple times a week. It's tough.
Well, this isn't the only industry, right? So, I mean, I think our industry, it's obviously fresh on our mind, but other industries might have similar issues. I imagine other like service-based industries. I mean, I can't off the top of my head. A lot of industries, I imagine, struggle with positions that, what the struggle with coaching is it's a high skilled job, in my opinion. In my opinion, it's a pretty high skilled job, but so it's hard to attain coaches who have that skill set, but then also be able to compensate them and show them trajectory at the same time. So in most fields where the skill set's relatively high, traditionally there's like this long, like kind of form. I think for us, we're in like this kind of like catch-22 where I feel like you do have to have a significant skill set to be an excellent coach. However, the business models are starting to break down a little bit. And it's a really good subject. Actually, I got an email from someone at CrossFit HQ and I was talking to them about some other stuff. And they said, by the way, love the concept that Gabe tested it in the email earlier this week around a different model arrangement around coaching. And he mentioned that back to me. So obviously something you wrote, got them thinking. I think these are the type of conversations that help lead towards the industry evolving. But I don't think it's just synonymous with just the fitness space. I mean, again, I imagine this happens in jiu-jitsu, but that's still part of the fitness space. There's a lot, you know what I mean?
I think the restaurant industry could be is a perfect example, right? Like I know a lot of people like you wait tables as like, trying to make some cash to, until you kind of figure out what's next. And it's tough to like make that a career. It is very possible, right? Like we just had Patrick Hummel on the podcast who started out as a busboy, became head busboy. Now he's like, top dog at like one of the most, impressive hospitality companies in the country. So it's doable, but I think that is another industry where like, how do you have your waiter or waitress like take this exceptional pride in the job that they do in the service industry if you know that they're just, trying to pay some bills while they, get their master's degree or whatever.
Yeah. And finding those people and training and developing them, identifying people who are going to school but still like Patrick was saying, like still take a lot of pride in their work. It's hard to find those people. And when you do find them, you got to keep them and you got to try and do whatever we can to retain them because they're unique in the space, right? Where even though this isn't their long-term career trajectory, they still treat it as such because that's where the way they do this is the way they do everything else in their life, right? They give 100% when they're on the floor, which is super inspiring for me. Actually, it's funny. I walked into the gym. MDV was coaching a class this morning. So,
oh, nice. MDV back on the floor. I love it.
He's back on the floor. But yeah, dude, I think articles like that talking to, I think Chris Cooper had some really interesting feedback, and like you and I were talking to him about. The fact that it's such a large group of people he works with is really interesting to me because he's gathering data across many different locations instead of just a few of them.
Yeah. So anyway, the now that like, just that being a big problem, the idea just on the surface was, is there a world where gyms could operate and really thrive with like contract-based gym roles, specifically hiring young men and women like straight out of high school, for example, where it's like, hey, you're going to come in and you're going to be a coach at NCFIT for 4 to 5 years and kind of set up a curriculum around that where you're teaching them skills to where, I think the other problem that we can all agree with is like, the 4-year university as it's set up now is pretty disappointing. It's super expensive, and what kind of real life skills are we really leaving with? Now, we don't have to turn this into a whole tangent about like what's wrong with our education system, but I think you can definitely make the argument that instead of going into all this debt to go to school, if you were to do something like work at a gym for 4 to 5 years and have a curriculum where you're like showing them, hey, here's how sales work, and then apply that to the business. Here's how you get better at public speaking and apply that to the business because coaching is public speaking. Here's how you market and apply that to the business, and have like something in place where you can teach these skills throughout the 4 to 5 years. And you're also getting paid while you do that. Like, it's not like you would pay the gym to like attend this like 4 to 5 year, like alternate path to an education. You would literally be getting paid at the same time, acquiring all these skills. And I think the other like part that's really interesting about it is a lot of gyms struggle with like, once coaches get to that point where they've been doing it for like 4 and 5 years or whatever the end of the shelf life is, they always tends to be this time period where there's like 1 foot in, 1 foot out, right? Like they're kind of burnt out. They know this isn't going anywhere. The gym owner kind of knows it's not going anywhere, but he's just trying to keep a warm body, coaching those classes for as long as possible. And the product on the floor suffers, resentment can build. And also like, there's no clear, like, this is when the relationship ends so that both parties can leave on like super amicable terms. The gym can find a replacement in the proper time. So I think that if you were to structure this to where, you come in, you sign a contract, you're going to be here for 4 to 5 years.
Apprentice program.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. And like, there's an understanding that this isn't your career, which is perfectly fine because in these 4 to 5 years, you're going to learn really valuable skills that will help you in whatever you're trying to do next so that you can move on and be super well equipped. But also the gym knows that, hey, Q3 2023 is coming up. I know I have to get another apprentice, intern, whatever you want to call it, in the pipeline because Jason's moving on and we're super happy for him to move on, but he's moving on. So we have to have someone ready and in the pipeline, and you don't end up, having as a gym owner possibly to go back on the floor and coaching 20 hours a week when that's really not where you should be spending your time.
Yeah, I mean, dude, I think it's an interesting model, right? Like an apprentice tradesmanship. Like, I think just looking at it through different lenses is going to be really valuable. And college, like, look, we've talked about this before. I think college has its value. I learned a lot, as many people who listen to the show, like I started pretty young in the fitness space and I fell in love with it. And I knew I wanted to own a gym from a really young age. But I basically did what you said, Gabe. Like I essentially did an apprenticeship at the conventional gym I was working at while going to college, knowing like very well that I told the owner, hey, when I'm done with college, it's for me, that's the end of my apprenticeship. In hindsight, maybe I should have gone a little bit longer, but like at the end of when I graduate college, that's a moment in time where I want to see growth. And so I knew that for 4 years, I would be underneath that leadership. I would learn a bunch of stuff. And him and I were both on the same page that once we hit the end of the college mark, boom, we went on to, I would go on to open up my own business. So I guess in a way, I almost did something similar to what you're referring to, where those expectations were pretty clearly laid out. So when I did pivot on, it wasn't awkward. It wasn't weird. It was actually more of encouraged because that expectation was set earlier on in the journey. So yeah, I mean, just adding validity to what you're talking about is pretty much how I got started in the fitness space.
Let me ask you something, and this might be a tough question for you to answer. I know you've mentioned in the past that, Ava's super interested in getting into medicine. So like medicine, one of those fields where like, 4-year university, no brainer. That's probably the route she's going to go if she continues to want to go that route.
Well, like 12. Yeah. She'll be in it for a while. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think that's straightforward. But like as a parent, would you have any reservations with Caden getting to that age and being like, dude, like, I just don't want to do that. Like, and maybe not necessarily, because I think another easy, straightforward route would be him wanting to like, be super involved with NCFIT and like, come into the business. But if he was just, whatever else, do you think that like you would have any reservations with like him not going the straightforward like university route? Because I think about that a lot as a parent now.
I wouldn't. I think it's because we've instilled certain mindsets into the children about hard work, about effort, about as long as they're not lazy and sitting on the couch and they identify something that they care about and they work really hard at it, I'm happy. That's the truth. Like, would I like them to get involved in this business? Sure. Would I want Ava to go explore being a doctor? Absolutely. As long as Caden, though, as he's progressing as an adult, is productive, right? I want him to be a productive person in society. I want him to reach his potential. I want him to work hard so that he could then enjoy the fruit of that work. And I think that right now I'm already seeing signs that the kids, like, they generally work really hard. So I don't think I'm gonna have to worry about them like graduating from high school and then just like coasting or living at home for the next 10, 20 years. That would be difficult for me because I don't feel like they're reaching their potential. And that would be very difficult to stomach. I don't think I'm going to have to worry about that. Whether they go to college or do something else, I think they're going to find their path and they're going to become successful at whatever they choose to do. That's that's at least what I hope to. I think with Ava, the likelihood of her getting into medicine is very, very strong. And I think with Caden, the jury's still out on that. We'll see what happens with him. I don't know, he might, play sports. He might, who knows? But Ava's pretty, she's been pretty committed to that for a long time. So that tells me that that's probably where she'll end up. And she's got, I think I don't know if I told you this. So today is, what day is today? Today's Thursday
the 16th.
The 22nd, which is next Wednesday, we're going in for her, so the 22nd of next week, we go ring the bell next week. So I'll have to send you, I'm going to definitely share that. Based when you ring the bell, it signifies that you're cancer free, that you beat cancer. And so like, in the gym, you have like a PR bell. In this case, it's like they roll on a bell and you ring it. And it basically is like a symbolic of you beating cancer. So we're doing that next Wednesday. So shout out to Stanford, Lucille Packard, best hospital ever. And we'll be there on Wednesday.
Man, I can't imagine the emotion of that day. I know that like it's really symbolic, right? Like it's just next week, like, probably not much is going to change next week, but I mean, the symbolism of it, right? Like the weight of like everything kind of coming to this conclusion. I can't imagine, but I can imagine it's a really, really, really big deal that people can't understand unless they've kind of been through it.
Yeah, it's a really big deal, right? Like, so you get to ring the bell, which, that's a cool concept that, and then you get a bell, like you get to keep the bell, which I think is a really cool idea. Because what happens with some of these kids who go through traumatic experiences, and something we have to, definitely keep our eyes on. And Ava's already had therapists in the past, and she's already been working on that years ago when she had some stuff that popped up. But there comes this sign of like there needs to be closure from this journey. And I feel like this is a step towards that closure, like where you sit there, you ring the bell, you say, we beat this, we're moving on. Like this is in our past. We're not going to dwell on it. We're not going to reflect on why me or this idea of getting so close to mortality, to death. Like you got to get past that. Otherwise it'll just keep holding you back is some of the stuff I've heard from some other families. So I think this is just a symbolic thing where the kid can ring it and mentally just say, all right, I'm moving on. Obviously, there'll still obviously be things that we need to continue to, keep an eye on. But in general, that's the step. Then the following week is March 29th is officially her last chemo pill was March 29th, 5 years ago. So that's the official date that we're using as like our thing. This was just the last doctor's appointment. So that's on the 22nd. Then we go back. We're going to go for an EKG. So the way they do it is, her last appointment at 5 years, they like do a general checkup. They do blood work, and the blood work is the most important thing because you can see all kinds of stuff, obviously. And then when you finish treatment, they do an EKG like on your heart, and they do a few other things to make sure that none of your vital organs, your heart in particular, was affected negatively by the chemo. So what they do is, in the beginning of your treatment, they test your heart. They look at a bunch of different things. Then like a year in, you have this one chemo that's like, they call it Red Devil, and it's the Red Devil. It's nasty, dude. And after this Red Devil, they test your heart again because that one statistically could mess up your heart. And then they test you again at this 5 year mark to make sure that the heart is still good. So far, Ava's been fine. So we'll test that. And then March 29th is that date. And then boom, we're celebrating in Europe this summer. So that's the plan, man. Not to go off.
That's awesome, man.
Not to go off on a 5 year tangent, but that's what's happening next week.
What a journey. I can imagine it both feels like, well, I don't know. You tell me, does thinking, because I'm sure that now that this is kind of coming to a close, I would imagine that you've remembered, some of the memories and some of the times and kind of spent some time reflecting on that. Does it feel like ages ago, or is it something that also just feels still pretty fresh because it was such a big deal for you and the family, obviously?
I think when you're at the hospital, it's super fresh. Like I get a little bit of anxiety. Like when I walk in there, I have to mentally tell myself, like, I'm going to feel certain emotions. I need to be able to control them. Like I'll feel like my heart, like even when I go there next week, like I will feel a sense of tension, 100%. Like I don't, not like in a negative way, just like as I'm walking through the hospital, it reminds me of a lot of like really, 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 really difficult days. So, I have to kind of put myself in this mindset of, like recognizing that's going to happen, acknowledging that that's a normal feeling to have, and then just coping with it while you're there, right? But it brings back a lot of memories. But in general, it was a while ago, right? I mean, you have 5 years out of treatment, and she was diagnosed, what is it, 4, 5, 6, 7 years ago. So like, it's been a while. It's just the treatment plan was so long. I mean, 2.5 years you spent in the hospital, just a lot of memories are hard to fade. But in general, yeah, it feels like a while ago. And I think we're really optimistic and positive for the future. And, but it doesn't change the fact of our dedication to help other people. It doesn't go unbeknownst. I don't even know if that's the right term. It doesn't go unnoticed to me that we are very, very blessed, and that we're through this the way we have been, and not everybody has that same situation. And so that's why we're dedicated forever to supporting families, because not everybody has the same outcome that we've had so far, you know? But yeah, certain areas in the hospital that kind of like bring back certain memories, right? Whether it's like workouts in the parking lot, like those were kind of like not fun, but those were like, interesting memories, or it's like the really heavy ones, right? Those are like the two that I get, like memories that were like whatever, like one that stands out to me, dude, is like 2 days after it was diagnosed, I was trying to get like a breakfast burrito or like a coffee, and there was like this little like one of those roach coaches they used to call them, like now they're called like like the buses that bring food. What do you call
Oh, yeah.
they used to call them roach coaches. Now they're like super bougie and famous and popular, like
I've never heard that, but okay, I know what you're talking about.
like a catering truck, right?
Yeah.
And there was this catering truck, and it was like right in front of the entrance of the hospital. And I was walking out there. It was like 2 days in. I was just, dude, I hadn't slept. I was just fucked. I was just messed up, right? I walk out there and I couldn't control my crying. Like I had a really difficult time. I just could not control it. And I was just trying to get a coffee and breakfast burrito. I just wanted like a little bit of normalcy. I just could not control my crying. I just couldn't. And I was like, not like out of control, but I just could not control it. And this guy just looks at me, this perfect stranger, right? Perfect stranger. I can't remember if he put his arm on my shoulder or if he just like looked at me. He's like, "Hey man, I get it. You'll be all right." Like at that point, it reminded me that everybody there in the hospital in some way, shape, or form is going through some shit. And that there was a sense of understanding for everybody there, especially in the oncology department, where people were there to support each other. It was a good initial moment to kind of realize where I was at and the type of people I was around, and that everybody was going through something different. And that happened like the day after. It's just like, that's one of those moments where like it sticks out to me, not because it was like I wasn't even with Ava. It just sticks out to me as like humanity and like this random guy trying to show me some love and some care, knowing that I was going through some shit,
Man. And I'm sure you have had the opportunity to like, be that for other people there in subsequent visits and stuff like that.
Yeah, we have. I mean, you try and be sensitive because some people, but yes, I mean, at that point, like I told you before, like, I mean, I think we've probably spent like 6 months in the hospital, like, off and on, a week here, a week there, a week here, a week there. I mean, maybe at least 4 months. And so you start to get to know people, right? When you're in this oncology, you get to know people because I slept at the hospital every night, and so did Ashley. And so you get to know people and you just like kind of share stories. And at that point, you see new families come in and you had maybe gone through a year of your journey. So you could share some insight and some feedback, and you create bonds and connections. And, they would have like a break room where basically like the way it works is like, I mean, if people are sleeping there, like, I mean, dude, you have like your microwave. And so like people would like microwave their breakfast in the morning and things like that. And that would be an opportunity just to sit and talk to their families. Some of them going through something worse, some of them going through something the same, but everybody was, there's just unique connections because you're connected over a shared vision, just, everybody getting better, So yeah, definitely I tried to impact people where I could, but you also are sensitive to not overstepping. It's a very it's a very sensitive subject.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. But I think that, it like puts you in a place where like you could go and either ask or get comfort because you guys are all in it together, right? Like there's an understanding that it's not just like, I would never understand. So like, it's almost like not the place or like, you almost have like that permission because you guys are in the same kind of situation and you get it in a way that no one else could.
Well, and it's oddly enough, they would have people who donated their time. One of the first people we met, this gentleman must have been in his 80s, and he would come and donate his time, and he would bring a picture of his son. His son had been diagnosed with leukemia years before, right? And so he'd bring a picture of his son, and he was just a volunteer, right? He would just go around, just talk to people, and his son was fine. But he came there as like a beacon of hope, right? So he came there, 80-year-old guy, just like super low key. And he would just walk in and be like, "Hey, do you want to talk?" And they had resources like there at the hospital that were really helpful because you were able to talk to them just like and you saw a light at the end of the tunnel because this person's been through it and their son is now 30 years old, successful, blah, blah. And so he would go around to the hospital a regular basis. And they have stuff like that at the hospital. Really, really, really cool. You know, like they have like this child service where people would come and they bring you toys and do different things. So they did the best they can. I'm very, very grateful for the resources that they had at the hospital, you know, because
Yeah.
it makes a difference. And anyways, you know, one other thing too is like, I think as I've gotten older, you know, I love what we do for a living. I think we could impact a lot of people through the gym. And I think that we are, in some ways, one of the best ways that these people don't ever end up, you know, not living freely, living fully, right? They come into our gym, they gain physical capabilities, which by the way, next week or a couple weeks from now, when we talk to Kelly Surratt, we need to talk to him about the sit and rise test and the breath hold test. So I was reading his book and he talks about the sit and rise test. I'm going to share this and then I want to go back to what I was talking about. But if you stand there and you cross your feet, right, and you sit down on the floor, can you then sit back up off the floor with while keeping your legs? So your legs are crossed, you sit down. Once you're in a cross-legged position on the floor, can you just rise back up by like kind of leaning forward a little bit and rising back up? And he uses that as the test that then correlates to some populations and their mortality rates, is their ability to get up to the floor and off the floor. So that's something we should definitely talk to him about in the next couple of weeks.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm excited.
And then another one was the breath hold test. Essentially, breathe normally. You then exhale everything, and you plug your nose, and you wait and see how long it takes for you to feel the sense of like anxiety that you don't have breath. And based on that number, it gives you an idea of how well you are consuming oxygen. We'll have to talk to him about it because I don't want to butcher it, but those are a few takeaways so far in the book that I've really enjoyed, is the sit and rise test and the breath hold test.
All right, we'll make a note of that.
Yeah. Okay. Those two. Back to what I was saying. So you're
this is what conversations with Jason Khalipa are always like, by the way.
So one of the things is, you know, at the gym we can make big impacts, but one time, and I know you and I have talked about this, but I'll just bring it up because I think it's important to note for any medical professionals out there, just the impact they can make. You know, I was Ava, she got coded, right? And so they brought in like 30 people in our room. It was absolutely mind blowing. I think we've talked about this before, but it was the most beautiful expression of teamwork I've ever seen. Just 30 people in the room, just da, 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 da. And this one guy who was the main doctor, young guy, he must have been in his early 40s. He was just orchestrating it like a coach, right? Just pa, 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 pa. Just absolutely beautiful, horrific, but beautiful. And so we ended up going to the ICU and it wasn't great. But I ended up seeing this guy a couple weeks later at the hospital. And I just walk up to him and I just say, hey man, you probably don't remember who I am, but I just want to let you know that you saved my daughter's life and I'm forever grateful to you. And I just think it can't, the importance of that is so crazy. Like first off the teamwork and then also to be able to do a profession where you can make such a big impact. And I feel like in our gyms, we make big impacts. We do on like a macro scale, right? We try and help people get away from heart disease and different types of things, right? Diabetes, et cetera. But this gentleman was very acute, very specific, right? There was a major issue. He came in, led the team that solved that problem and saved Ava's life. And it was just like, I just can't thank those type of people enough because there was a few of them along the journey that really made a big impact. And so shout out to all the doctors, nurses, and nurse practitioners out there who are making a difference on that level. And then shout out to everybody else who's doing it on kind of a different scale here in the gyms.
What was his reaction?
His reaction
you
was,
remember?
Yeah, he was obviously he was appreciative. I don't know if he remembered. I think he might have. But he was humble, right? He was appreciative and humble. Like it wasn't like he was like boasting, like, oh yeah, I did that. He's just like, thank you very much. Like, really appreciate that. And he just kept walking. And that was it. That was my only interaction with him. If I saw him again, I would know exactly who he is and I'd say it again, you know?
Yeah. Man,
yeah,
that's crazy stuff, dude. But yeah, I mean, you know, to your point, whether it's a fitness coach or a doctor like that, like we are all part of the solution in different levels. And I think that, showing gratitude to, the coaches out there that have had an impact on your life and stuff is equally as important, right? And in different respects, but yeah, like to really kind of understand that fitness professionals have an impact. I mean, I've talked about this on the podcast before, but like, to see how my parents, especially as age, like they're like seeing them versus their peers and the fact that they've gotten into fitness and stuff and like where everyone has gone in the, probably 10 years now. Cause I started first CrossFit specifically in 2013. And then my mom followed, my dad followed, so on and so forth. But to now have 10 years to see kind of how their lives have progressed versus some of their friends and peers, it's insane, dude. It's crazy. It's so that makes it so black and white to your point. Like, I think there's a lot of undervaluing the impact that gym owners and coaches have. But dude, to see it that black and white is absolutely insane.
Yeah, man. It's like an anti-aging cream, like
100%.
Dude, it's so funny. You see someone who's like in their 60s, but stays in good shape, works out. They look good. You see someone in their 60s, 70s who, has lost the ability to live freely, live fully, can't get up off the couch. They're gonna look older just by the way they move, right? And I think you can come into the gym and start working towards that. My dad. So my dad sends me a message. He goes, "Hey, I want to get some fitness equipment for the house." I'm like, "Okay, Dad, whatever you need," right? And so he goes on Rogue and he sends me the order, and he ends up getting this barbell. It says Khalipa Senior on it. He orders his own custom barbell, and he orders a pull-up bar to hang from the roof, which I think is great, right? I think pulling up your body weight is such a great expression of fitness, right? So my parents were at our gyms for years, and then one thing led to another, COVID, this, that, life circumstances, and they both haven't been in a while. My dad likes to ruck, so he walks, and I gave him a rucksack to wear just to kind of load it up. But he was really upset with himself that he can't do a pull-up anymore. And so he got this pull-up bar. I got him a band, and basically we're putting him on a program for the next couple months to take him from where he's at today back to a pull-up. And I think it's cool to see, people, just because you might fall off on your journey, and this goes for anybody at any age, you could always get back on that journey, and that journey could restart again, and you could be doing it until you're 90 years old. So if you are listening and you fell off your journey just a little bit, just jump back on the journey, and you don't have to go all crazy about it. Just got to start one day at a time and little small steps. So he's on his journey to get back to his pull-up.
How old is your dad?
My dad is 69. Yeah. He's not 70 yet. 68, 69, something around that.
And you can always get back on it, always make progress. I'm sure he'll have his pull up. And I think that's one thing people don't realize, right? Is that it's never like, oh, well, it's too late. Like, let myself go for too long, whatever it is. Like, never. Like that time doesn't exist. There's so much to benefit from regardless of where you're at. And
it's actually kind of exciting to me. I mean, I don't know about you, but like, if you're in a place in your life where you're not in phenomenal shape you used to be, like getting back into phenomenal shape or better shape, like it'll come back quickly, and it'll be fun to watch your expression in your journey. Like there's so much more in the tank that you could get to as long as you stay committed back to it. And it's going to be tough in the beginning to kind of rebuild those habits. But man, like my dad, for example, he went from deadlifting a couple hundred pounds, doing a pull-up, et cetera. It's hard for him to get like exponentially better at that point when he was really in it for years. Now that he's kind of fallen off a little bit, he's going to be able to exponentially see those results come back, which I think is super rewarding and super fun in the process. Like for me, my numbers, basically I've already hit my primes. So I'm just trying to stay where I'm at as long as I can.
For sure. Yeah, it's a little bit different, but that's awesome. For my parents, a little different because, when they moved to Texas, because we were here, and me and Ariel, I mean, but like my parents left their jobs, their friends. And a big reason that they were able to do that is because we don't have any other family here in the States, like all of our families back in Ecuador. So, they really didn't have anything tying them to New York, but they definitely had friends and relationships, and they went to the gym there and so on and so forth. And I think another thing that isn't talked about enough is the importance, especially as you age, of having relationships and friends and staying connected, and not just becoming like, hey, you're home all day, you're watching TV, so on and so forth. Like, you could still be working out, going out on walks, but if you're not still socializing, like, there's a lot of studies and also just anecdotally, like, it keeps you young. And the really cool thing was that my parents moved out here, immediately checked out, the 2 gyms in the area, found one that they liked more than the other, joined, and then, in a few months, they were getting invited to, like, the gym holiday party, and there was a baby shower and whatever. And my dad, because my dad is like in his 60s and he, like, loves working out and stuff, like, people gravitate towards him and they really enjoy having him around. So he gets invited to all sorts of stuff. He got invited to a hunting trip the other day. So it's also been really cool that, like, my parents, who moved to a completely different state without, having anyone here but us, immediate family, now have friends, and they're going to social events and they're doing all these things because of the gym, and because they, like, were immediately able to plug back into a community. And that stuff is so important. And it's so important too, because they're generally hanging out with people that are younger than them. And at least I think that keeps them young 100%, so it's been really cool to see that aspect of it too, because, we always talk about, body fat percentage and, like, being able to pull yourself up and pick yourself off the ground, but continuing to be social and be around people and have relationships is equally as important. And I think that a lot of gyms, ours included, the gym out here in Texas included, allow that. And I think that that's special, because, a garage gym can't do that.
Yeah, shout out to your parents for doing that. I mean, look at so my dad came from Iran, didn't know anybody, right? Your parents came from Honduras. They didn't.
Ecuador.
Close. Ecuador. They didn't know it. I don't know why I said Honduras. Ecuador.
Like, very confidently, like, Honduras. No, it's all right.
I didn't know anybody. And then basically are starting again and doing that again. And that's tough to do, man. Like, shout out to those. Like, I don't think I could do it. Like, where I live, I've lived in the Bay Area my entire life. And one of the reasons why we haven't been able to move is because we have too many, our friends, our family, like, we're too connected in this area. And it's like, to be able to get up, and that dedication to the family is so key. Like, look at your parents, like, they left, and I'm sure this doesn't go unnoticed to you. Like, they left their way of living that they had done for probably 20, 30 years, whatever it was, in New York, to then go to Austin to follow you and Ariel and the family. It's like, dude, that's cool, man. That's dedication right there. I mean, that's awesome.
Yeah, man. I don't take it for granted. I don't take it for granted a single day. But yeah, man, it's been fascinating to see them plug into a community and really enjoy it. And back to what you were saying, like, leaving, family, friends, both for your parents and my parents, like, also, going somewhere where there's different language. Like, can you imagine that? Just like going, like, you don't speak the language, you have a couple bucks in your pocket and just, like, you're going to go and make it work. It's insane. If you really think about it, it is insane.
Dude, yeah. Like, I think about it all the time. My dad came, he ended up in, I want to say his first place was Washington, D.C. Then he went to Alabama, and then he ended up in California. It's like, dude, you come from Iran, you don't speak English. And you have to, like, it's really interesting. And then, it's a really crazy story. It's kind of dark, but it's crazy. My great grandma and grandpa were from Rhode Island. So they came from Italy. They ended up in Rhode Island. From Rhode Island, my mom, my grandpa, and my aunt and grandma, they lived in California. Well, my great grandparents were visiting them from Rhode Island, right? And unfortunately, at that point, my grandfather, who was a doctor, got called in for an emergency surgery to help this child, ended up getting hit by a drunk driver and passed away. That's why I say it's dark, but it's interesting. So at the time, my great grandma and great grandpa happened to be here from Rhode Island in California visiting. They never went back home, ever. So, like, I just think about that all the time. The dedication to the family and the commitment, where they came here, they're just on travel, right? Oh, we're going to be here for a week. We're going to be here for 2 weeks. My grandpa passes away. They want to be there to support my grandma, my mom, and my aunt, and they never go back to Rhode Island, not to grab their stuff, nothing. it just is fascinating the way that works, and it's inspiring in that sense, right? Like the dedication to the family.
Yeah.
I know it's dark, but that's kind of a crazy story, right? Like,
Yeah. Never going back because,
never went back.
you got to be here.
Like, where else am I going to be? I'm going to be here. So, yeah, man, it's like I don't know how we got off on these subjects, but it goes to the depth of like family, close friends, having good relationships, connection of community, finding the gym maybe is a way to start that. Obviously, if you move to a new place, it's a great way to create new relationships like your parents have.
Yeah. It's been really crazy for me now that I'm a little older, obviously, and in a very different stage of my life, being a dad. I've been spending a lot more time like talking to my parents about just things that like when we talk about it, I remember, but like I don't really remember.
Yeah.
And it's been like a really fun stage in my life too, to like revisit all that and have a very different relationship with my parents now than I did before, because I don't know. I don't know how to explain it. It's not that we're peers, but we're more peers now, right? Because we're talking about parenting together in the context of like, yes, I was the kid back then, but it's definitely been a big shift, and I've really enjoyed it. Like I've really enjoyed just like, I'll call my dad at night and we'll just talk about, Shay and like being a dad and things that we did when I was young that I don't remember. But it's been interesting also. That shift has been really fun. I feel like I've always been close to my parents, but I feel like I'm closer now because it's a different relationship. Like I'm less their kid and more like we're both parents that are just really close.
Well, yeah, and like the goal should be like generationally, the goal should be to improve on what your experience was, right? That should be the goal. Like you were raised a certain way. There were some things where they're amazing, maybe other things you would have done differently. Then you evolve that when it's your turn. Then your kids say the same thing, and then the hope is that like over the years, like generationally, you get to this like kind of peak state, because no one's ever going to be perfect, but that's the goal, right? Is over time.
But
At least that's the way I look at it, right?
yeah,
So,
but I wonder if you think about this, because I think this applies, to you as well, especially with, your parents and kind of how your dad came here. Like I do worry, and I talk to my dad about this all the time. Like I think a lot of the things that have really served me well in life have come from, things not being like super easy. And not that I had like a tough upbringing. I really didn't. I was very comfortable, but like, we didn't grow up with a lot. And I think that taught me how to like value things, and it taught me how to like save. Like one of the things that all immigrants do is you save your money. And I think that it's been really, really useful for me. But like, how do you instill some of these things on your kids now? Because to your point, you always want to improve, but how does wanting to improve not turn into like giving your kids everything and then the value of things not being there? Because, I had to work from as soon as I could, because my parents couldn't give me any of the stuff that I wanted. They gave me everything that I needed. But if there's anything that I wanted, like I was lifeguarding as soon as I could to make my cash so I can buy the stuff that I wanted for myself. And I think that taught me very valuable lessons. How do you make sure that you teach that lesson if now you have the means to be able to give kids stuff that they want and, not always say no, which is, equally as tough?
yeah, I mean, dude, it's a really tough. I think what gives me like some like the way I think about it is the fact that we're even having the conversation means we're aware of it. That if we give too much, we could create children who don't, who just expect everything to be given to them. That's just not the way the world works. And so I think the fact that we're aware of that, at least my family, Ashley and I, we try and regulate things. Do our children have everything they need? Yes. Do they get some of the things they want? Yes. Do they try and make their own money? Like Ava has done different jobs and Caden does certain things. We try and pay them a little bit to do certain chores, for example. But I think that the fact that you're even aware of it is going to be a helpful thing. Because I've seen people, what money does, it just magnifies who people are sometimes. I've seen people who have a lot of money who are still down to earth, super humble in all these different ways. Then I've seen people who get a lot of money, but then it just exemplifies like whatever characteristics they already had. And I think what's important is teaching children from a young age, hard work, dedication, treating people right, all the things we talk about, and that money doesn't grow on trees, and that there's a lot of people I don't think everything should just be given to the kids. I guess what I'm trying to say is that they need to pick and choose. They need to work towards something. And then it also provides them with more, like, they have more buy-in. Like I remember early on, we got Ava something. It was pretty expensive. Let's just say it was like a couple $100. We got her something, and she didn't treat it with the type of like respect or whatever, because she didn't work for it. It was just given to her. But all of a sudden, when she has to earn money, selling things, for example, she does some like these like chocolate, like popover things that she sells sometimes for like $2 or whatever it is. When she goes out and buys something for $50 that she's had to work hours to do, you're damn right she's taking care of it, making sure she doesn't lose it. And so I think those lessons at an early age are really important, because otherwise they just treat things like it's just some random thing. They don't realize that it took somebody a lot of hard work to get that item. So those are a few things that are on our mind of how we're adjusting. But it's a constant evolution, Gabe, because you want to give your children everything. But if you give them too much, I think that they don't learn some valuable lessons that are going to serve them poorly in the future.
Which I think takes us full circle. And I know we have to hop off soon because we have a meeting coming up. Takes us full circle to this idea that we started off the podcast with like, there's so much value to just going right to work, I think, at a really early age. And this idea of like getting people to like start working at a gym from an early age, I think is so valuable for so many reasons. Like what we were just talking about now, I learned some of my biggest lessons and skill sets that I still use now with my first job that I had through college, which was working at the triathlon store in Manhattan from an early age. I think working retail or working at a restaurant in service are like, they're musts. I couldn't, if there's anyone that's like super young listening, like I can't stress enough how valuable it is to work retail or work like in the service industry. Like the skills you learn there, I think are huge. And I did both. I waited tables in the summer and I worked, at a triathlon store where we were paid on commission to sell. And I think that like, I took so much away from those two jobs. Like they were at times like, you don't want to be spending your summers working or like after college having to work. And I had to, but man, like it was so valuable.
Dude, when I was 14, they had this like unique thing through the city of San Jose where it was a work experience program. I met a really good friend of mine there, Ben Belbono. When we were 14, we met there. And what they did is they took you in, they taught you about working, and then they had you work the front desk at different community centers. So like a community center for your local, whatever. I started off at 14. It was a boring job, right? It was really boring, but because you're just working the front desk and I would like hand people coffee or whatever. But, from that early age, you get to see like, dude, if I work these many hours, I only made $80 or whatever it is. It's like, dude, I'm being more aware of what I'm spending. And then it puts perspective on what your parents have to spend, but if you never have that perspective, and if me as a parent, if I don't provide that to my children, they can't really relate because they don't know what it means to like, $10 is not chump change. Like someone had to work for that money, So, but the apprentice idea, dude, I think we should lean into that more. We should see where that's going to go for the fitness space. Could be a good option for us.
Yeah. And, specifically what I like, I think that that's a great idea. There's so much you learn from being a coach, having to be in front of different people, having to like teach them things, have them buy in, sell personal training. But the really nice thing that I liked about the retail job I had is that it was commission based. I think that as soon as you're working in a job where you're like earning commission off what you sell, and it becomes like so correlated to, are you being successful? You make more money. I think it forces you to get really smart with not just like how hard you're working, but I remember what I quickly realized at the store that I was working on, because it was like a triathlon shop. So like everything runners and cyclists would need. What I learned early on was that, everyone sold shoes because that's what we were known for. We were known, you would like come in, we would film you running on a treadmill, recommend a pair of shoes. But like sometimes, and this happened, maybe 1 out of every 3 people would go through the whole process and then they would be like, oh, like they would try to buy them online because it's cheaper to buy them online. So you would spend all this time and then, some people just weren't interested in buying the shoes. But then what I learned was that if I spent all my time learning and becoming really good at selling the GPS watches that were a lot more expensive and that we were priced even to what you could get online, I could do a lot better. So what I quickly started doing was I would just spend all my time like standing by the GPS watches and selling those. And I quickly became the guy in the store that like knew more about those watches than anyone else. So because everyone didn't have interest in like learning the ins and outs of all the features and like everything, they would just like, if someone was interested in a GPS watch, they would literally be like, oh, go talk to Gabe. Like he knows all about that. And I managed to make a lot more by not working, not as hard, because I like took a lot of pride in learning that stuff, but I didn't have to like sell 20 pairs of shoes a day. I could just stand by the GPS watches. And if I sold 3 in a day, I was making more than everyone else that was selling the shoes. And I think that forcing you to be creative and figure out those things and seeing where the most value is also for the store, because they loved that I was selling these expensive GPS watches and not the shoes that had less margins. So it's kind of like a win-win for everyone. And I think it taught me early on to like figure out where the most leverage is, where you can be different than everyone else, and where, you know, like you can serve also the customers, because those specific items, like people had more complicated questions about it because it was a much bigger investment for them. So then being able to talk to someone that really understood what it does, what it doesn't do, the battery life, like what's the difference between a Suunto and a Garmin? What do you recommend for me? I swim, I bike, like which one, like being able to really help them with that was valuable enough that they wanted to buy it off of you and didn't even think about, well, I'm going to see if I can get it cheaper online. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. I need to get one of those, by the way. I'll have to talk to you about the GPS watches here. You know, when I took over collections for like a brief time at Milpitas Health and Fitness, and I used to get 10% commission on any of the collections that I recouped. So I would go through, people would owe 500, 1,000, whatever. A lot of the times people would hang up on me, but if you got a few of those collections, 10%, man, that was 10%. That was money in the bank, baby. Well, hey, I know we got a meeting we got to jump on for the NCFIT Collective. Speaking of which, if you're a gym owner or you're a coach and you have not checked out the NCFIT Collective, the world's best session plans, programming, the same exact things that we use in our gyms every single day, make sure to check those out. You could email Gabe at NCFIT. You can email collective at NCFIT. And if you enjoy this podcast, if you enjoy these episodes, make sure to go back, listen to all the other ones. It'll probably take you a while. There's also the Coffee Khalipas, and hit us up on social. I get comments, you know, pretty regularly. It's pretty fun. And so hit us up on Instagram, you know, at Gabe_Yanez, right? Did I get that right?
That's right.
Yeah. At least I didn't say, Nick, no, I was going to say Honduras again. And then, or at Jason Khalipa. Any closing remarks before we got to jam off?
No, man, that was fun. I love when we ended up riffing on stuff that we hadn't even talked about before. That was a really good one, man. I appreciate it. Yeah. If anyone has any questions, I've been starting to get a lot of replies on the B2B newsletter I send out. I want that to be a conversation. So if you subscribe to that, if you think something's a good idea, bad idea, if you want to talk a topic for me to talk about, just hit reply. I see all of those. So, you know, feel free to contact me there as well.
All right. We'll keep getting after it. See you in next week. Let's go.
All right, man.